The wind had a way of speaking first in whisper hollow. It rustled the cottonwood leaves before the preacher rose, whistled through window cracks before mothers could hush crying babes. It carried things not meant to be heard, secrets, old names, songs no one dared to sing anymore. Ruby Calhoun stepped off the stagecoach with boots worn soft at the soles and a jaw clenched tight around unshed words. Dust settled on her shoulders like it recognized her, and maybe it did. She'd been through towns just like this before, where people nodded instead of asked, where nothing grew unless it learned to survive first. She wasn't here to stay. Just a few days, long enough to mend a dozen dresses and vanish before anyone remembered the color of her eyes. That was her rhythm. Move, work, vanish. Keep running before the past caught up and recognized her face. She hadn't made it 3 steps before a voice, clear as sunrise, stopped her cold. "Want to meet my daddy?" the little girl asked. "He's 30. Ruby turned. A slip of a child stood barefoot on a whiskey barrel, a wild grin stretched across her sun-browned face, and 2 braids flying in opposite directions. One braid held a red ribbon, frayed at the edge. The kind of child who didn't wait to be invited. "He's the sheriff," the girl added, proud and soft in the same breath. "He don't talk much since Mama died. But I think he'd talk to you." Ruby blinked, caught somewhere between the heat and the ridiculousness of that sentence. "And why would he do that?" The child shrugged. "You look like someone who could stay a while." Ruby laughed before she could stop herself. Not because it was funny, but because no one had looked at her like that in a long time. As if she was made for something other than leaving. "What's your name?" Ruby asked. "Millie McGraw." "Well, Millie McGraw," she said, adjusting her grip on her satchel, "maybe I'll meet your daddy. But not today." Millie grinned, undeterred. "I'll be here tomorrow." Ruby didn't mean to look back. But she did. That night, she took the smallest room above the general store. It smelled of cinnamon and old paper, and the bed creaked like it was remembering something. She placed her sewing kit on the windowsill, her satchel beneath the bed, and the burned photograph, wrapped in handkerchief cloth, in the drawer she didn't plan to open again. But opening or not, memory seeped in like smoke. The next morning Ruby saw him. Sheriff Beau McGraw stood on his porch, hammer in hand, mending a stubborn post. His sleeves were rolled, his hat dipped low. Broad shoulders, steady hands. He looked like a man who once knew how to laugh and forgot the shape of it. When he glanced up, their eyes met. He tipped his hat. Nothing more. She didn't return the gesture. But she didn't look away either. That was the beginning of something neither of them had words for. Millie made good on her promise. Every day after school, she marched into the general store where Ruby mended dresses and jackets and asked impossible questions while licking peppermint sticks she didn't always pay for. "Do you believe in angels? Why do grown-ups cry when no one's looking? Do you think my daddy misses my mama or just the way she made coffee?" Ruby never answered directly. But she always listened. Sometimes Millie brought torn drawings of people she'd made up. "This one's you," she said one day, holding up a figure with bright red hair. "She looks brave." Ruby chuckled. "She looks tired." Millie tilted her head. "Same thing, I think." People in town began to notice. The sheriff's girl spending time with the new seamstress. The sheriff himself lingering outside the store longer than necessary. He'd bring buttons to be replaced. Coats mended. Always Millie's, never his. Always silent. But sometimes he stayed long enough to hear Ruby humming under her breath, soft songs, old songs. She didn't know he was listening from the porch. Ruby kept her boundaries in place. She fixed what was broken, spoke little, smiled even less. But inside her, something moved. Something long asleep. One dusk, Millie sat beside her, legs swinging beneath the bench. "Do you think people can come back from sad?" she asked. Ruby paused her stitching. "Some do." Millie's voice lowered. "Daddy don't sleep sometimes. I hear him walk the porch. Mama's quilt is still on the bed. But he won't sing no more." Ruby didn't know what to say. The silence between them said it for her. Later that week, a storm rolled in, dry and angry, the kind that swallowed towns whole. Ruby had just delivered a mended coat to the sheriff's house when the wind rose behind her like a ghost. She barely made it inside before the sky turned to rust. Trapped, she stood awkwardly by the door as Bo closed the shutters and Millie danced beneath the table like it was a ship riding waves. Ruby hadn't shared a roof with anyone in years. The quiet was deafening. Bo poured tea without a word. His hands were cracked, clean, deliberate. Ruby accepted the cup. Their fingers didn't touch. Still, her hand trembled. "You from anywhere?" he asked finally, voice hoarse from disuse. "No place worth mentioning," she said, sipping. He nodded. "I reckon you've run from something." She looked out the window. "And you haven't?" His silence was answer enough. He leaned against the frame and stared into the fire. "I loved her," he said. "More than my own name. But when she died, I stopped being someone worth loving." Ruby set her cup down. "I left my brother in a burning barn. I was 14. I ran and he didn't." The storm rattled the windows. They didn't speak again for a while. But neither one left the room. When the storm cleared, both thanked her in a voice almost too quiet to hear. Millie hugged her leg and whispered, "You made it warmer." That night, Ruby didn't dream of fire. For the first time in years, she dreamt of blue skies and soft dirt. Spring arrived slowly. The harvest dance was announced on hand-painted flyers, and the town stirred like a bear waking. Ruby told herself she'd leave before then. Dances were dangerous, too much touching, too many eyes. But Millie begged, "Just come. Just for a little." Ruby didn't answer. But she stayed. On the night of the dance, she wore a blue dress she made for herself, simple, without frills. She stood on the edge of the gathering, the music too loud, the lights too soft. Bo stood across the lantern-lit square, in a clean shirt, eyes searching. He didn't ask her to dance. He just stood still until she took one step forward. Then another. They didn't waltz. They didn't spin. They just swayed, barely moving, lost in a silence that held them both like a promise. When the music stopped, neither let go. She stayed the night on the porch bench, wrapped in a borrowed quilt. When she left at sunrise, he didn't stop her. But he didn't close the door either. The next morning, Millie arrived at her room with a flower clutched in her palm. "I asked Daddy if you could stay forever." Ruby knelt down. "And what did he say?" Millie grinned. "He didn't say no." Later, Ruby found a second coffee mug sitting on Bo's porch railing. No note. No questions. She sat. He poured. They drank. Seasons turned like pages. Ruby taught Millie to sew crooked stitches. Bo sang again, only on Sundays and only softly. Ruby stopped locking her satchel. She opened the drawer with the photograph. They married beneath the cottonwood, under sky and witness. No preacher. No crowd. Just a quiet promise made with hands held tightly. Ruby stitched her own dress, pale ivory with rough seams. Bo wore the coat she mended that first week. Millie stood between them, holding a wildflower. No one clapped. No one cheered. But the wind shifted that day, not sharp, not cold. Just softer somehow. Like even it believed in second chances. Sometimes, healing doesn't ride in loud. Sometimes it walks beside you and waits. And sometimes all it takes is a little girl and a simple question to start everything over. "Wanna meet my daddy?" she had asked. And Ruby had said yes. She'd meant to leave. But she stayed. And that changed everything.